Hello and welcome to ZMass Productions Calibrated Reviews. Today's episode, Jessica Jones. I'm Luke and I'll be doing a solo review. So recently watched all of Jessica Jones, binge watched it from 2 a.m. until roughly 2 p.m. when it first launched. Would have had this review up a lot sooner, but I had stuff to do. So, reviewing it now. Let's get into it. First up, the story. The story may contain spoilers. I'm going to try and keep it as spoiler-free as possible, and basically just do a summary of what happened, what it's about, give you a gauge so that it piques your interest, makes you want to watch it more. So essentially, the story of Jessica Jones. It follows a superpowered character after a terrible run-in with the supervillain Kilgrave, aka Purple Man. At least that's who he is in the comics. Essentially, he takes her captive for months, messes with her head, and makes her do all these terrible things. She's now working, by the first episode, you meet her as she's working as a PI, and she thinks Kilgrave is dead. They explain why as the story goes on. And she's suffering from alcoholism and PTSD from her experience, etc., while she's trying to do her best to just simply live a new life and move on. So there we go. That's where you first meet Jessica. Essentially, the show will introduce you to a few key characters. First up, obviously, the villain, Kilgrave. Second up, obviously, the title, Jessica Jones. She's your main character. She's your protagonist. Then you've got Trish Walker, a.k.a. Patsy, a.k.a. Patricia, a.k.a. Hellcat. In the comics, she becomes the character Hellcat. Hellcat. In this, she never actually becomes Hellcat. She doesn't have superpowers, anything like that. But she's essentially Jessica Jones' foster sister, so to speak. And probably the only person that's super close to Jessica. So, you get introduced to her. And then you've got Luke Cage. You get introduced to Luke Cage for the first time, which is important because he's got a series coming up. And then you also get introduced to the character Jaren Hogarth, who is a lawyer who sends cases to Jessica to solve. And so on and so forth. He's also Jessica's lawyer to an extent. And then you've got Will Simpson, who is a cop and ex-special ops. You'll find out more about him later. And he plays a very interesting character from the comics, a B-list villain who he never actually goes full villain, but shit happens much later in the season. Essentially, the show starts with a case about a missing person. Yeah, a case about a missing person gets brought to Jessica, and by the end of it, she starts assuming that Kilgrave is involved. It escalates, something bad really happens, and then she's almost convinced that Kilgrave is still alive. So then for the whole first act, because much like Daredevil, this series is built like a movie, where there's a first act, a second act, a third act. So for the first act of the series, Jessica is trying to prove that Kilgrave is alive. Kilgrave was involved with the case she was working on, and she's trying to catch Kilgrave. So, all these little elements. And so you move on from that with her trying to find Kilgrave. By about episode 6, she gets a much more heavy beat on him and starts to actually find him. And that's when the second act picks up. Because at about episode 6, you know the main players, you know the main characters, and shit can start happening. So then the second act keeps going until roughly around 10 or 11. And the whole second act is a tug of war between Jessica and Kilgrave. It's essentially Kilgrave wants Jessica to legitimately fall in love with him because he thinks he cares about her and all this other stuff. So he's trying to kind of recapture and be romantic to Jessica, but ends up just coming off as a creepy stalker guy, obviously. Which is even more creepy because of the abuse he did to her beforehand. And then Jessica wants to lock him up. So it's that weird thing of her trying, it's like a cat and mouse, where the cat and the mouse are constantly changing who's the cat and who's the mouse. And that's the whole second half, or the second act of the series, which is the good middle portion of it. Then finally, the third act happens when shit basically hits the fan, and Kilgrave goes full villain at this point, and he's trying to become stronger. And it turns into a race against time as Jessica has to try and stop him. And that's basically the last act, which is like the last 3 episodes, maybe 4. Some of the acts kind of flow into each other. So like when I say the 6th episode is basically where the second act starts, it really picks up in the 7th episode essentially, but like it, you know, it kind of just blends together. So like halfway through it just moves into it very organically, kind of like it's got like a real life vibe to it. So yeah, that's the story. Hopefully there was no spoilers in there. I don't think that was spoilery, but you know, people call the weirdest things spoilers nowadays. So that being said, some positives. Basically the whole show. And I'm not kidding when I say that. It's very much like Daredevil in that it's very organic with how it does things. It builds everything up the same format, but unlike Daredevil, Daredevil's more a superhero origin story where you're struggling, gritty, realistic superhero vigilante dude, and Jessica Jones is more of a detective noir type of thing with people within it with superpowers, and it's very family oriented. Well, not like target market. It's family oriented in the storytelling because Jessica cares a lot about Trisha and stuff like that, and it's really Jessica trying to come to grips with the shit that she thinks she is responsible for. And so she's trying to be responsible, essentially, and fix things. And so yeah, basically, for positives, I would say it's one of the smoothest writing experiences I've seen ever. It has very little to no exposition throughout the entire series. It doesn't explain shit to you or hold your hand, and when something does happen, it's kind of naturally, like through a flashback or something like that. It's not in your face with the exposition. So it kind of just organically gives you the information you need. You get to put the pieces together yourself and then just enjoy the story. It's intelligently written as well. It's amazingly well acted and very well delivered show. Contains a female lead. Those are all decent positives. When I say it's really well acted, it's because Daredevil, the acting was kind of hit and miss. Even with the main characters, they kind of, I don't know, didn't always feel organic, is what I'm trying to say. And with Vincent D'Onofrio, him being the exception, him as Kingpin, it takes you a while to get used to him. But when you think about it, his acting was like around a 9.5 out of 10. And like everybody else's was like 7.5-ish for the most part throughout the whole season. Whereas in Jessica Jones, everyone is clocking in at like an 8 to 8.5 for their caliber of acting. So like it's just across the board, just all equal footing, which helps to keep that organic feel to the entire series. So that's just my opinion on it. It could just be because the directing is good and the writing is amazing and all that stuff as well. The show does, another good positive is it has a wicked sense of humor. The dialogue has a lot of witty banter in it and other stuff that makes it feel, gives you that Marvel vibe without it being down your throat. And it fits the Marvel Universe too because it's got the same thing as Daredevil, where it's the aftermath of the first Avengers. Like superpowered people are kind of still trying to live a normal life, but when they get outed, they've got stuff they have to deal with and trying not to hurt people, blah blah blah, all that other stuff. So yeah. Some other positives. Essentially, the show does a really good job at keeping you from ever really knowing what is going on. unlike Daredevil, a lot of the stuff ramp up and you kind of see it coming. Jessica Jones, a lot of the stuff that happens, you don't even see coming. Like, you know something's going to happen, but you have no clue what. And then as soon as you think you know what's happening, it'll flip it completely on you. Which is why that whole second act, I say, is like a tug of war between Jessica and Kilgrave, because shit is constantly changing. And you've got some other dynamics in there, because you've got Patsy, or Trisha, trying to help Jessica. And she has a different idea of how Jessica should go about it. Then you've got Simpson. You have Simpson trying to help her, and he's got a different idea of how to do it. And then you've got Hogarth trying to help her, and she's got a different idea of how Jessica should do it. So you got all these different influences, like trying to twist Jessica around and do things in a certain way. And finally, she finds her own way by the end of it, and it comes together nicely. And it includes Trisha, and it's just really well done. If I were to go for negatives, I'd say some stuff occasionally feels very momentarily out of place. Like, there's a few things that happen that kind of break the beat of everything that's going on. But at the same time, it all fits. So it's kind of like one of those things where they could have edited it out, but they didn't need to edit it out. So a lot of the negatives are more or less like small decisions. Like an example of a small decision, one of the final episodes, there's eventually a fight that happens. And in this fight, the camera angle they decide to use is very disorienting. And it's really up close and in your face. And it doesn't work for the scene, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So it's like very small, minor negatives that are very technical stuff. So not going to get all into that because most people don't care about that type of stuff. So, yeah. This is where I say a verdict. And my verdict is Jessica Jones, 8.5 out of 10. I don't like getting into the 9 territory because for me a 9 and a 9.5 is the highest anything can ever get. Because nothing can ever be perfect, and 10 is perfect to me. So, above average, so it's 8.5 for me. Totally worth seeing, especially if you're looking for a good show to watch. It's adult though, so don't let your kids watch this. Like, keep your kids far away from this until they're like well into their teens and you're ready to explain some shit to them. But yeah, it's really good. So I recommend you catch Jessica Jones as soon as you can. It's better than Daredevil. I'm confident in saying that. It's better than Daredevil. Much better. It hooks you right away. But if you don't want to keep watching it by the end of the first episode, you don't know a good story when you see it. And I'll live by that statement. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. And comment below on things about Jessica Jones. What have you liked in the show so far? If you're currently watching it and haven't finished it yet. Did you like it? If you've totally finished it, geek out with me down below. I'll try to comment as soon as I see shit. But not always checking it, but I try to check it very often. So yeah, thanks for watching the first ever complete Calibrated review.